This is Future Sense Now, where we explore the landscape and byways of our shared futures. Future Sense Now is brought to you by the Futures Forum. Stay tuned for a journey to the futures of women with host Dr. Claire Nelson.
Greetings and welcome to Future Sense Now, the online e-zine of the Futures Forum. I'm your travel guide, Claire Nelson, and we're taking an exploration of the future and the futures of women in particular. It is March 2017, and we're really curious about how the year 2030 is shaping up because it's what is called a pull year for the global community. United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, 17 of them, and one, SDG 5, speaks specifically to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. And there are several targets, and these targets range from ending all forms of discrimination to ensuring that women have equal rights to economic resources, as well as access to ownership, workforce, information technology, and all the things that are about empowerment. And so today's guest, I'm very excited to have with me Joyce Gioia. What a beautiful name. That means she brings joy wherever she goes. And she is a strategic business futurist, a long-standing, in fact, founding member of the Association of Professional Futurists. She's president of the Herman Group, which has long been publishing the Herman Trend Alert. She is, as I said before, focused on business, but what is interesting about Joyce is that she has also done some work in the area of, I would say, New Thought theology. I'm going to use that term, and brings a particular perspective to the way she views the world. And there's lots more to say, but I'm sure it will come up in her speaking. And so let me now say, welcome, Joyce Gioia. How are you? Welcome to Future Sense Now.
This last week, I was at a celebration of a big birthday for me, and my youngest daughter showed up with a t-shirt, and that t-shirt said, "The future is female." And I think that is absolutely 100% correct. And by the way, I wore that t-shirt yesterday home on the plane, and I got a lot of thumbs ups.
Oh, really? No, that's interesting. So this whole meme has sort of come back to the fore when women took the streets in their pink pea hats, saying, okay, no, we won't go back to being barefoot and pregnant. And we don't mind being pregnant, but barefoot and pregnant means something in particular. And so there seems to be a resurgence, if you will, of a new wave of feminism. And I say new wave of feminism because it may not be the exact version as it was of the 70s and 80s. But with the UN Sustainable Goals speaking to this sort of a sense that we need to move forward as a global community. How do you think, indeed, that this moment in history and this January has begun to serve as a new platform for making a future that has more feminine ideals?
I was very encouraged by the 50,000 of my closest friends whom I saw marching with me that fateful day in Austin, Texas, the Women's March.
So you were actually marching in Austin, Texas?
I actually was marching in Austin, Texas. I believe that we have to be active. It's time. It's no longer acceptable for us to sit on the sidelines and just let things happen because they're not happening fast enough for women. We are making great strides in the areas of education, and eventually that will make its way into the ozone and the O-level positions in corporations, but it's not happening fast enough. And it's not acceptable that in the United States that we earn 73 cents for every dollar that men earn. It's just not acceptable. I was personally the victim of these kinds of policies for many, many years when I was working in corporate America and for other organizations.
But okay, so here's a question I have to ask, because as I look at the global community and I look at this idea of women rising to the top, in the early days when you were, say, the only woman in a room, there was a sort of, you dressed like the men, you spoke like the men, and you became known of a sort of a B word with a W, which in order to sort of prove that you were the guys. But at this moment in history, would that be the way in which women lead or own power, or should we in fact bring to the fore a woman's perspective of what power might look like in order to really change the paradigm so that we can really save humanity from self-extinction?
I think it has to be a combination.
Mm-hmm.
I think that for us to believe that it's okay just to ignore what are the accepted norms in corporate everywhere is ill-advised. I think we have to be aware and we have to work with those norms if we want to get ahead. But I also believe that, well, in my experience, my life works better when I also attenuate that masculine drive with who I am as a woman. I think it has to be a combination. I don't think that we can afford to ignore who we are as women, because I think if we do that, then we're losing something. We're denying a part of who we are. Now, at the same time, and I was really surprised that I didn't get more pushback on this.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a trend alert not
Yes.
that long ago that was in somewhat support of a fellow who had written an article, I think in HBR, Harvard Business Review, that talked about the fact that he suggested that women engineers and women mathematicians submit their resumes with two initials, their first and middle initials, instead of their first names, so that they would be considered the same as a male resume, because gender bias, unfortunately, is alive and well. And in fact, I have another trend alert that's on my drawing boards about gender bias in technology that it was just written about once more in, I believe it was Harvard Business Review. And it's there, and we have to do something about it. And unfortunately, just ignoring it is not going to help. We have to learn what's there and do what we can to not resist it, because we know what happens when we push against an immovable force, but to take it and work with it and see if we can bend it to our will. And I think one of the ways is for male recruiters to be surprised when it's a woman's resume that they've looked at, that they've seen.
So that's a very interesting idea, in terms of, unfortunately, trying to manage the gender bias in the way one recruits. But do you not think that, given we have sufficient women in, let's say, the new technologies, in the internet world of Silicon Valley, we have enough women in that space, that sort of a bias really does not exist anymore? I mean, we have enough women, don't you think? The
No.
Sheryl Sanderses of this world.
No. Women represent something like 6% of the CEOs in corporate America. And they represent a lot more outside of the US, but very, very small percentage within the United States. I mean, I don't know that number exactly, but I believe it's a very small number. And if we look at the number of women who are able to rise up in the ranks, it's still a relatively very small number. Now, here's the good news.
Yes.
The good news is that more than 60% of the young women who are graduating from our colleges and universities are women.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, more than 60% of the students who are graduating are women. And what that means to me, and it's even higher in some of the non-Ivy League schools where they're caring less about gender balance. I mean, Harvard is still like 64. That's 4% more than what they want to be. But they're looking at who they want to have in their university. And the challenge is, and I've written about this too, that many of the young men simply don't want to work that hard. And if they don't, and if there is this kind of culture that working hard and getting good grades is just not the in thing to do, then they won't get into those better colleges, and they won't get into college at all in some cases.
But is it
And
important to go to college now anyway, given that I think one of the things even your work is talking about is the future of the workforce, the future of jobs, period, the future of lack of work and technology. And so, I mean, given that fact, do we really have the need for all these women to have these degrees if they won't have work? Or do we need women to be in power now so we can change the rules in how work is valued, so we would actually allow for like more time before you automate everybody out of existence?
well, Claire, I would like to think that we're far enough along that college degrees don't matter, but they do. And they matter a lot. And if women are to compete in this ozone level, at this ozone level,
Mm-hmm.
they must have MBAs. There is just no question about it. It's the
Exactly.
entrance degree for any kind of a corporate executive position. And it's like there's just nothing that we can do about it. We can talk about it. We can talk about the fact that college degrees in many cases are not as highly valued. But if we want to get these women into these higher levels in corporate everywhere, they need to be educated. And there's just no two ways about it unless they're going to intern under a CEO who just happens to be someone who's willing to bring them along. They have to get their tickets punched. I mean, let me give you
Yeah.
an example.
Yes.
Once upon a time, I spoke at something called a learning festival for the country of Singapore.
Yes.
And a fellow questioned me from the audience, and he said, it's just not fair that these young guys are coming in and they're taking all of our jobs. They're pushing us out. We used to be the leaders of the companies, and now they're pushing us out. And I said, well, what do they have that you don't have? And he said, they have MBAs. And I said, well, why don't you go back and get an MBA? And he said, well, I shouldn't have to. Exactly what.
And on that note, we can just end this conversation because basically he's saying even though he didn't invent anything or innovate anything, he still is qualified by virtue of the fact that he is a male to have a leadership position. So the question then becomes, because as somebody who I'm very focused a lot on the global
And
futures.
let me add one more thing.
Yes.
The fact that he was an older male,
Uh-huh. So
therefore had more wisdom and more knowledge.
yes.
But the thing is that he understood how things had been, not how things were or would be.
Now, I would say now we find ourselves in a similar position in the United States. We have a very old and male executive branch. Um, and there is concern that their worldview may not allow them to bring in, even in the undersecretary positions and division head positions, enough, let's say, fresh blood to sort of really be able to peer out into that wispy emerging future and really create the sort of a pathway to America's success. And I think that is what people are trying to get to, but they're probably not able to say it so well because they may not have the language for it. So they're marching and protesting, but again, if we don't have the language to describe it in a way that it can be heard by, let's say, people who might be more mindful, what are we going to do?
Well, I think there are those of us who are leaders. I'll give you an example. There's a wonderful woman named Wendy Davis in the
Mm-hmm.
state of Texas. Do you know
Yes.
who she is?
No, I don't.
Well,
Please
Wendy
share.
Davis ran for governor in the state of Texas
Uh-huh.
against Greg Abbott,
Mm-hmm.
who is our current governor. And Wendy Davis had been the person who stood up in our state legislature and filibustered for something like 11 hours.
Good for her.
Her pink tennis shoes she wore, she saves for very special occasions. And now she's a speaker and she's talking about gender bias. And we need folks like Wendy to be out ahead of this, to help us to articulate what's happening. Because you're right, many of us don't know how to put things in ways that will have an effect. And I think that we need people like Wendy and others. And that's why I'm writing about gender bias now on a fairly regular basis, because I think it's one of the things that we really need to address as a society, and not only in the United States, but worldwide. I mean, when you think of the women who are making great strides in Saudi Arabia, still can't drive a car by themselves. I mean, wow, it's a problem.
Well, they probably won't need to because it's a flat country and they have self-driving cars. So they don't. I mean, a self-driving car is not going to work in Jamaica, where I'm from. I mean, or India for that matter, unless you have, really change the roadside. But maybe in Saudi Arabia they can afford to build roads that can manage self-driving cars. But to come back to this issue of work and power, because in fact, as we look at global society, and the reason why the Sustainable Development Goals exist is really because there is a real concern that we have really reached the extent of our ability to use a zero-sum game in the use of our natural resources. And the way we treat with Mother Earth really needs to have a total 180-degree shift. So my question is, are we then also preparing women to take not only leadership but a different worldview into the spaces where these global rules around technology or business or trade make a difference? Because if they're going to just go and rule the same as men, what is the point? If they're going to rule from a masculine perspective, what is the point?
And I think that's one of the reasons why we actually make such good leaders. And by the way, I've written about that as well, that Zenger and Folkman, who are two very well-known consultants, have written extensively about how and why women make better leaders. They are considered better leaders by their followers, which is really interesting under the circumstances that we elect these old white guys,
But why is that? Is it that because I guess I'm hearing from people in the workforce now that the millennials who are entering the workforce have a particular worldview that make the management of them very different from the traditional hierarchical rule. In other words, they just won't stand for it. They're not used to it. They didn't grow up in the school system where they were like, whooped. They kind of were always affirmed, if you will, and they feel that they are wise and they're wise enough. So my question is, given that, and I've also read somewhere that right hemisphere of women are developed a particular way, and because of this we're able to do that cross right brain thing more effectively. So are we then saying that if we pay attention and we find a way to use this kind of moment in history to be intentional and strategic about how to protest, when to protest, but also to have intentional, let's say, goals that the protests are moving towards, then that we're doing so also with a view to having the right woman in leadership, so we can basically save corporate America, save the corporate world, so we can actually save the world. Because if private sector is running water and energy and food and health and how we mine, how we take out uranium, how we throw away waste, if this is all going to be privatized under the old paradigm, we're not going to survive.
Clearly. And yes, indeed, we need to have women leaders who have a different perspective on things and who perhaps have a kinder and gentler way of looking at the world. I mean, this is not to say that there aren't a lot of ruthless women leaders in the world,
Okay.
but certainly no woman, to my knowledge, has been accused of genocide.
Well, not yet. So I have a question, and this is kind of a way out there question, because you are, I'm sure, getting a lot of emails and letters also about this issue of artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence in the workplace. And I'm thinking, as you think about the future now, seriously, I'm sure you're also observing the transhumanist movement. If artificial intelligence
True.
is going to be used as part of the leadership and decision making class, how do you see that working in terms of the, since it's also programming, right? This is intelligence that is programmed. How do you, and this is really supposition because nobody knows, but how do you think we would ensure then that the AI is not programmed with, let's say, a logic stream that is based on a highly masculinized version of reality?
That is an excellent question, my friend. And I don't know the answer to it because I am not an expert on AI. I can tell you, however, that AI is coming into HR in a big way.
Into HR.
HR,
Okay,
yeah.
and how so? How so?
Making decisions, hiring decisions, because there's now in beta test 2 programs named Wade and Wendy. Wade is a career coach for candidates and applicants, and Wendy is a screener for HR professionals. There's another program that's being developed by a friend of mine named Anthony Onesto. He's with Razorfish, and Anthony has a program called Sue AI, and Sue AI will replace transactional HR generalists. So she will be able to answer all of your questions about your 401k and the benefit program and how much money you have and all of those questions that it has taken a human to handle will now be able to be handled by artificial intelligence. In fact, Anthony uses a scheduling program called Amy Ingram. And Amy Ingram is artificial intelligence. And I was communicating with Amy Ingram saying thank you and how very kind of you and being very gracious. And I was communicating with a software program for 3 weeks and I didn't realize it.
Wow.
That's how good the AI is now. So Oxford said, you know, that Oxford study on automation said that HR would be in very good shape in terms of being replaced by artificial intelligence. That is not happening. That is not what I'm seeing at all. I'm seeing just the opposite.
Okay, how so?
Well, if we can replace the recruiting function
Yeah.
with well, it's not really the recruiting function yet. It's really the pre-screening part of the recruiting function
Mm-hmm.
with artificial intelligence. And if we can create an artificial career coach, my gosh, what's next?
Yeah.
And Sue AI is replacing the transactional call center. I mean, I have an award winner of the Employer of Choice Award that put in a whole call center of just these HR people who are transactional so that their employees could call up and get the answers that they needed.
Wow.
Imagine that whole call center being replaced by a software program.
So then my question then, if we look at the UN goals about women and all of those things, and we look at this issue of gender relations, and we look at this issue, perhaps the backlash we're seeing is not just really about women. We in other words, women become sort of the the ones that are easy to attack, but in fact, the backlash that really is more about where we're going to find work. Because if men are still conditioned that we're supposed to go out and hunt and bring home the bacon to feed, the wife and the three children and the dog and the house, etc., and there's no place to go hunt, what happens then to the idea of what masculinity is and the male's purpose, especially if we have a society as we have in America where the idea of having surrogate parents and test tube babies that's already gone through the window. No woman really needs a man for that. You can just go and get a sperm and impregnate it in your mother, and that's it. So my question is what we're seeing in terms of the scenario that speaks to backlash only about women are too uppity, or is it also about the economics of the future that involves we have not yet found a replacement for work, but work is disappearing? What do you think?
I believe that's what one of the things that the Millennium Project is addressing, is it not? Is
Well, I'm
what
not sure. I don't know that much about what they're doing, but certainly as somebody who comes from a developing country, as somebody who's concerned about human development. I'm an engineer, but I'm concerned about the fact that I grew up in a society where I was always told the devil find works for idle hands. So if people are supposed to be purposeful, if we're supposed to be purposeful doing farming or art or music, but people say, well, if they can't work at the factory, they'll go out and paint. But if painters are not paid to paint and there's nobody to buy their paintings because there's no money, then how does it work? So I guess as somebody who is very much you're on the road. In fact, I believe you got Road Warrior of the Year from USA Today or something. As somebody who is on the road all the time, what are you hearing when you go out and speak to all these people? What are you feeling and sensing?
Yes, I was just actually in Brazil, and yes, I was named USA Today's First Road Warrior of the Year. Fortunately for me, they never named another one, so I continue to be USA Today's Road Warrior of the Year. I was just in Brazil, and I was talking with some fellows who are intimately involved in the new technologies, and we almost had a town hall meeting to discuss automation and how it would be affecting the software designers' lives within the next 10 to 20 years. Because by the year 2030, which is your target year, we will even have software designing software. That's not so far off. Yes, really.
So I sigh because I am concerned that the world of the global management, the world of the national politics, and the world of corporate brinksmanship, let's call it that, right, are in three different strides. And maybe they are not. But it seems to me that if we are not able to find ways in which we can bridge that gap. So my question then becomes, now that women seem to have a reason to get up and march, is this an opportunity for women in the corporate world, women in the public sector spaces, and women in the civil society spaces who are concerned about access to work for themselves, their children, even for their husbands or their sons? Is it an opportunity for us, since we don't have to worry about, do we have to press the nuclear bomb today or do we have to go to war tomorrow? We kind of have a little bit of luxury of not being under that pressure to, show that we're the winner, we're in charge. Do we then have the time, and do we have the intent, and do we also have the responsibility to convene that conversation?
I believe that we do. And I believe well, that's why I put my feet where my mouth is, and I marched in Austin. I believe that it is our responsibility now to take our place, to take what is rightfully ours. And I don't mean by force, because that's not how we do it, but to negotiate and to get what we deserve as women. I mean, we do so much. We contribute so much to society, and so much of that is not compensated for. There's so much caregiving that we do as women that is just not recognized for its value to society.
Even to get a tax break for that, for example, would be a useful thing. So it's talk about changing the metrics, changing the rules of the game. Do you think then, as you sort of are well respected in this future space, you are pretty well known in Austin. Austin is a city that's known for being innovative. So you've had South by Southwest, for example, or whatever the correct word is, as one of the flagship things. Might Austin then become, with somebody like you there, a new space for the construction of the future of the world as seen by women?
Possibly. And the thing is that, as you pointed out so appropriately, I am a road warrior. And that what that means is that I am not here all that much.
Yes.
And so I'm not perhaps the right person to do that for Austin. I mean, I know that Wendy Davis is now on the road a lot herself, speaking and talking about and promoting the future and the end of gender bias and what we need to do about it. And honestly, I would love to have more time, in a way, to be here and to do the lobbying and to do the marching. But I think that each of us, it falls on us as responsible women to do what we each can. And I believe that one of the things that I can do is to keep writing about this, to keep bringing it up, to keep bringing up the conversation, so that people begin to think, well, maybe the fact that Hillary Clinton didn't win the presidency did have something to do with gender bias. And clearly, the United States was not ready for a woman president. I I would tell you that I don't think it was ready for that woman president, but I'm not sure that the United States was
Ready?
up for any woman
Yeah,
president
yeah,
at
yeah,
this time.
yeah. So,
Just as, and you can take this for what it will, the U.S. was not ready for a black man to be president when Barack Obama was elected president.
yeah,
Otherwise, he would not have been met with so much resistance at every single turn.
yes, yes. Well, on that note, then, given what we discussed about the future of work, the future of technology, and the challenge of change making, would you say you're optimistic, pessimistic, or neutralistic? That's a word that I like to put in there. I made it
Okay,
up.
well, I believe that intention is very powerful. I use it every day, and my husband says, "How come we're in first class and nobody else is?" And that's because intention is very, very powerful. And when I do anything, I do it with great intention and will. And I believe that that's what we as women must do if we want to succeed in making these changes, in getting this progress, this advancement of society, in having the world understand that we deserve to be treated as first class citizens, just as do all men on the planet.
Well, that's a good place to end our conversation. I would like to say thank you so much, Joyce Gioia, president of the Herman Group, for being around with us, talking a little bit about the way you see the future, sharing this new information about new HR resources coming our way in the very near future. So, HR people of the world, look out, your job's also on the line.
Women of the world, unite, because it is our time.
Our time.
Keep a positive attitude, because we will make great strides.
And on that note, thank you so much again for joining us, Joyce Gioia of the Herman Group. Folks, thank you for listening to another edition of Future Sense Now, our online e-zine, and where we strive to bring you the diverse voices of those who are helping to shape our shared futures. Today's guest was Joyce Gioia, and as I leave you to ponder your own pathway and road to constructing this thriving future, remember that it is better to see ourselves as the parents of our future as opposed to the offspring of our past. Safe journeys.
You have been listening to Future Sense Now with Dr. Claire Nelson, brought to you by the Futures Forum. For more, please visit www.thefuturesforum.org. Thank you for listening. Spread the word. Share the future.